Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. Our guest today is Connor Boyack. We're going to talk about all sorts of really interesting things. Very different conversation, probably, than any that I've had on the podcast up to this point, because you've got your hands in a lot of different areas that my other guests have not. So I've got to welcome you first and foremost, Connor, and let's talk about all the stuff that you've got your fingers in.
Well, thanks, Alicia. I'm happy to be here. I love entrepreneurship. I love creating value. I love impact more than anything. So I've always tried to surround myself with impactful people. But I sensed a decade ago that a lot of these people, my entrepreneurial friends, had these problems that they were running into. They were trying to start a business. They were getting shut down. Uber and Lyft was just starting to operate. They were being shut down everywhere in my state, as in many others. Elon Musk could not sell Tesla cars to people because the car dealers had gotten the laws changed to say you have to sell cars only through car dealerships rather than direct to consumer. And over again, there were these challenges that I was hearing about food trucks, having a nightmare of regulations trying to get permits in cities to even operate. And along the way, I had been dabbling a little bit in politics. I had been on a political campaign. My mom back in the day was a city councilwoman. I kind of had a little bit of this in my blood. So I said, you know what? What if my core value proposition is being entrepreneurial, but in a different way, not starting a business and creating a product? I'm going to go the route of a nonprofit. I'm going to set up a think tank. And our whole goal is going to be try to remove these barriers so that these business owners and others could just go do what they want to make our world better, because that's what entrepreneurs do. But if you're sitting down and you're heads down coding a new app, or if you're out there negotiating a deal on a new piece of property or whatever, everyone's got their core competency, and those guys aren't lobbyists. They don't know politicians. They don't know how to deal with red tape. That's something that could be our kind of diverse skill set that we would hone in on. So we've changed over 100 laws. Many of them are the first kind in their country. And really our bread and butter is trying to focus on these types of regulations and laws that are impeding business owners from developing their product or doing what they want. And so that's what I love doing, because I feel like by helping all my entrepreneur friends get those barriers out of their way, they can, better go to market, serve the world, change the world for the better. So I'm kind of me and my team, we're kind of behind the scenes helping a lot of these companies clear out those hurdles so that they can go do what they do best. So that's what our nonprofit does, Libertas Institute, and really just trying to create more freedom in our society for a lot of these businesses that are running into problems, but they often don't like to talk about it. They don't want to message that they have these issues. They work with us and other organizations like us, and we can go get those problems fixed for them.
You made a really powerful point in there, and that's entrepreneurs are not, in many cases, they don't have the mindset, they don't have the skill set to be making these types of political moves. So in many cases, if something's working against you, it just becomes an insurmountable obstacle. Now, certainly we know that a lot of entrepreneurs, they're badass. They're gonna go for it, right? They're gonna make
Sure.
things happen. But the the fact that you can support business owners in this process of getting all that red tape out of the way is really valuable, because most of us just don't have the drive, don't have the time, don't have the
No,
skill set to do that.
you're exactly right. I am a big believer in the principle of who, not how. This is taught most famously by Dan Sullivan with Strategic Coach. They've trained tens of thousands of entrepreneurs. I do. I'm coached there as well. I think it's fantastic. His concept, who, not how, is so often as entrepreneurs, we wear all the hats. And as a founder, especially, you have to. You're doing the accounting, you're doing the customer service, you're doing all the things because it's just you. But the way to grow your impact, your influence, the way to scale is by not thinking, how can I do this? Instead, it's who can help me do this? So if an entrepreneur, rather than thinking like, oh, great, I've got to go wine and dine politicians and I have to go up to the Capitol and I have, no, don't figure out how to do it. Instead, find a who. figure out who in your network or who someone can introduce you. Find who. I'm the who for a lot of these people, but there are other who's out there. Or for me, if my who, like I gotta raise a bunch of money as a nonprofit, rather than me thinking how can I do it, I say who can help me do this. If I hire this key person, I can delegate to them. They'll focus on that. I can be freed up to focus here. I think one of the problems I faced and a lot of business owners face is we get stuck in the how trap. We're very competent. We're good at a lot of stuff. We developed a lot of skills in our early days, but it becomes a ceiling that inhibits our growth if we don't get rid of those tasks and delegate them to other people. Instead, start thinking, who can help me with this so that I can focus on my higher order, core competencies. And so that's where we can come in for other people. It's just a fantastic principle that I've been able to incorporate in my life to realize the way I grow, the way I increase my impact and the growth of my organization is not by figuring out how to do more things. It's instead looking for who can help me do those things and then grow our influence together.
That's a huge mindset shift that any successful business owner has had to go through. And I've seen with my clients, sometimes it's an easy one, and sometimes it's a really hard one.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people who are wearing all the hats are really slowing down their growth, not to mention the unnecessary stress that they're creating. And if they do have a small team, they're oftentimes the bottleneck. So,
It's true.
when we are embracing this principle of the who, not the how, and this is kind of a little bit off of the topic of your business and more the topic of your personal experience. I'd love to find out from you if you have any thoughts on the individual who's listening, the business owner who's listening right now, who gets it. They understand that it's absolutely essential,
Mm-hmm.
but they're stuck. They're stuck in the fear of someone is going to mess everything up, or they're going to get taken advantage of, or whatever that case may be. I know for some of my clients, even if their business is thriving and growing, there's always that apprehension about that new key employee or that consultant that costs more than they've ever spent before. So I'd love if you would maybe shed a little bit of light from your perspective, both personally as well as the business owners that you are working intimately with on overcoming that mindset obstacle.
Two ideas initially come to mind. The first is connected to the prior conversation. This idea of who, not how. I would say get the book. Dan Sullivan partnered up with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and they wrote a book called Who, Not How. It is a fantastic book that dives deeper into this and addresses these exact types of concerns because we all have them. What if they're only going to do 60% as good or 80%, or they're going to take twice as long, or I can't let go. All those things are resolved and addressed in the book. I would highly recommend getting that book, Who, Not How. The other mindset shift for me along these lines of letting go, delegating to others, hiring a team where you do have those trust concerns, or you do have that maybe skepticism about, is it going to work? Is anyone going to, I can't clone myself. So am I really going to find someone who's going to do it as well as I figured out how to do it? For me, a lot of it has boiled down to a shift in mindset of seeing these individuals not as a cost, but as an investment. And, for me, investments are long-term things. If I buy Bitcoin tomorrow, I shouldn't be looking at it every single day and freaking out when it dips. My boy, I was teaching him investing right before this economic slump that we're in, and I got him to invest $15 of his savings. We use this app called Greenlight, which is a fantastic app for kids for saving and managing money that we use. And they have the ability to invest, micro amounts of money in there. He invested $15. His investment's now worth like $9 or something. He's freaking out. And I'm like, no, hang on. It's the long term. You got to let this play out. Same thing in my mind with delegating and growing the team, that this is a long-term play. Short-term, things may dip a little bit. It may be uncomfortable. They may only operate at 70% of, where I would be if I continue to do it. but it's that Stephen Covey begin with the end in mind. The end is I need to extend my impact and influence in the next decade. I want to be working on the business, not in the business. I do need a team. It's going to be challenging for me to offload things and delegate and come up with processes and everything else. But I know that that's the end that I'm striving for. So I have to be willing to go through the uncomfortable parts in the meantime. And because I see these individuals now, or try to, as not a cost, like, oh, it's going to be so expensive to hire this key person for my organization, but rather as an investment. I try and have open conversations with that about the people I hire. I say, look, you're asking for this amount of money. How do you think that within the next year you'd be able to bring in this much or more to our bottom line to justify your position? Rather than these individuals just thinking like, hey, I've got a job, I try and get them to think like, man, I've got to create at least this much in value. I'm asking for 100 grand. How am I going to bring 100 grand in value to the company so that I'm not a cost to the company? I want to be an investment. I want, the best candidates I've interviewed, without me even prompting them, they'll say, hey, I've got ideas where I could 3x your investment in me in the next year. And I'm like, holy crap, like what candidate talks like that? The fact that they're already thinking ROI for me, and they're coming up with plans ahead of time. I'm like, you're hired, like start now, start yesterday. So shifting the mindset away from this being a cost of either my time, because, oh, I'm going to have to train this person and I'm going to have to monitor them and make sure they do it right and blah, blah, blah. Or a cost of money, like, yeah, I got to pay 100 grand for this person. Instead, realizing that, I have to invest in the long term. It is for the long term. There may be dips and bumps along the way, but this is the path. We know that investing your money is how you build wealth. We know that investing in other people is how you grow your impact and your influence. And so I just have to suck it up a little bit in the short term and get through some of those, bumps and dips, and realize that the long term, I'm going to be on this upward trajectory. That's where I want to be. And knowing, kind of beginning with that end in mind, empowers me to suck it up in the short term to realize, okay, this is just a necessary part of the journey. It's like going to the gym, after the new year, and you got to burn off all the calories from Christmas. It's going to be painful, but in the end, it's going to be great. I think it's the same kind of idea here.
I love it. A lot of gold there. These are practical things. Most people can wrap their head around some of the examples that you gave. We tend to react emotionally. Old fears, old doubts, old insecurities that are holding people back. But now, when you can get really clear on what that end game is, it does make that short term dip, if you will, a little more palatable. And obviously, there's something to be said. There is, in some cases, a bit of a learning curve. You may not hire the right person the first time if that's a new arena that you're playing in. But I love something that you said, and I want to get just a little bit metaphysical before I shift gears. And that is that you're actually experiencing people coming to you with a mindset that really matches your expectations. And a lot of people are, their experience, it really is somewhat of a match to their preconceived beliefs and expectations about what employees are like, which isn't in many cases very positive. So I've seen it. You've got that mindset hang up that people are just out for a paycheck. They're, slacking off the moment that you're not on their ass, whatever the case may be. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you have that type of clarity, when you've got your own mindset dialed in on what you want, it's much more probable that you're going to have even the right language, right, in the conversation to inspire that thought within that individual, to be able to really key into, hey, that person is the right fit. When we don't have that clarity, there's all of this sort of cloudy, stuff that goes on in our minds. And that clarity, I think, is a really empowering thing for us as well, because even if we have some fears, some doubts, some apprehensions, we still have sort of that map, right? That guiding light to what that ultimate end objective is. Whereas a lot of people are just sort of hoping and praying, you see this a lot in newer businesses, I think, and perhaps you've experienced this as well, especially for solopreneurs. I've noticed you go online and you've got all of these courses and programs and advertisements promising this, that, and everything else. And without that level of clarity, you're just sort of like grabbing and hoping. And it's kind of a messy outcome when you're operating your business without that clarity.
Well, I can imagine some people listening, Alicia, are saying, great, I get it. It's important. How do I get it? How do I get that clarity? I don't have it. I'm floundering. I'm treading water, whatever. One of the best resources that I have to recommend on this exact question is a book called Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. It's a short book. It is not long. And the basic gist of it is going through some thought exercises to contemplate what your business is going to look like 3 years from now. Not five, because, who knows what the world is going to be like in 5 years. That's kind of far out, let alone 10. Not one, because that's not enough time to really see significant progress. 3 years is kind of the sweet spot. So you envision yourself time traveling into the future, looking around your business. Wow, look at our top line revenue. Look at this award we got. Look at our marketing department. It's this big, and here's what they're doing now. And you envision this future business, the future version of your company. And you spell it out in explicit detail. You write it down. You tell a story about your business 3 years from now. You get clarity, that exact clarity through this process. And then as you share this with your team, or even if you're a solopreneur, you share it with your vendors. Because if you can share it with anyone you have a relationship with and say, this is where I'm going and this is where I'll be 3 years from now, one of your vendors may be like, oh, hey, cool, I have an idea about, how to help you get there. Or someone on your team may be like, oh, well, actually, I've got ideas about how to get there. One of the biggest problems I think we have as leaders, as founders, is that we have the vision in our heads. We have the map, to use your language earlier, but we don't effectively communicate that to people on our team. And so people come in Monday in the morning and they're logging on and starting to just clear out their email inbox and their tasks, but it's very disconnected from that higher order kind of vision and progress that we're trying to go in. We may have a vision statement on our website, but it means absolutely nothing. They're usually just word salad, and it does nothing to empower our team to be like, oh, I know where we're going. That's a world I can help build. Suddenly my work becomes meaningful in the drudgery of the daily whatever, because I see the vision and I share that vision. So the Vivid Vision, that book has, for us as a team, and I've recommended it to many others who have adopted it and loved it, been very helpful to get the map out of my head, communicate it to my team, to my vendors, to my contractors, and say, this is what we're trying to do. Now everyone is completely clear, and they're bringing me ideas saying like, hey, this is part of our Vivid Vision. You have this other plan over here. What did you think about this? I'd be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But because they now know, they can create value as well. Whereas before they were just falling into this task execution trap of just doing what they were told. And then I was resenting them for not being creative and thinking outside the box. But it's because I hadn't communicated to them where we were going and allowing them some freedom to figure out a different path to get there.
So good. All right, lots of great takeaways. I've got to segue because I want to talk for at least a few minutes about your book series, because your I love your vision for that and the intention for them. So can you talk a little bit about that for a few moments?
Yeah, so I've written, gosh, I don't know, 37, 38 books, somewhere around there. I lost track. A lot of them are children's books under our Tuttle Twins brand. This started 8 years ago because I wanted to help my kids understand what I did all day. I went on Amazon looking for books that teach about entrepreneurship and, free markets and freedom and all the rest, and there was nothing. So, a buddy of mine, Elijah, who's our illustrator, he and I partnered up to create our first children's book. And it kind of blew up. A lot of people started reading it and then said, when's the next one and the next one? So our children's series, it teaches things like, what's money? How does inflation work? Why does central planning fail? Why is entrepreneurship so critical? How do you develop a business plan? How the free market is amazing because it's millions of people all over the world working together to, create a better society. All these things that you would think schools teach, but they don't really teach. And one of the things for me that I've seen have such impact is because a lot of our community is entrepreneurs and business owners and people really trying to make the world better. I've seen over and over again how they get very frustrated where their kids are, going to school, or maybe it's on TikTok or wherever, and they're hearing a very scarcity minded mindset, victimhood, blaming other people for their problems, entitlement mentality, all these types of things. And the parents are often out of tune with that because they just assume, oh, my kids are going to school, they're getting a good education, kids will be kids, whatever. Meanwhile, the entrepreneur is out there hustling, investing in themselves, really honing in on a growth mindset, reading a lot of books. And what I've seen over the years is in a lot of these families, the parents and the kids diverge. And the parents are over here becoming increasingly kind of growth minded, creating value and so forth. And their kids are getting a totally different message. 5, 10 years goes by and the parents are like, what the heck, how did my kids turn out like this? And I'll say, like, well, did you talk to them along the way about these ideas and how the world works and money and well, no, I thought the schools were doing that. So the name of our series is the Tuttle Twins, and the whole point is to empower families like this to have conversations together. Don't assume that your kids are learning it at school or from social media or whatever. In fact, assume that they're being exposed to messages you completely disagree with, and as a result, provide a counter agent, provide a different perspective, have some critical thinking conversations. So our books have, workbooks and discussion questions and all this stuff, really to empower those conversations to happen. We've sold over 4 million copies. We're in like a dozen languages. We've got a cartoon now that's free. You can find it on YouTube. Really just trying to build out like a content empire through our Tuttle Twins brand so that parents can be supported in having these conversations with young kids, with old kids. We've got stuff for teens, we've got stuff for toddlers, really just trying to say, like, we're here to help you talk to your kids about, stuff that matters, principles that are true, that have created our amazing society, that are under attack in a lot of ways. So let's talk about it. Let's figure out how we as families could do something about it. So that, I guess, in a nutshell, is what we're doing with the Tuttle Twins.
So I think it's absolutely amazing. And I've found as a mom, my son is 13. He's got a little bit of the entrepreneurial spirit in him, and I've been nurturing that. And it's so exciting when I get to give him, some guidance. He was trying to figure out how do I build this client for this thing he was creating, some kind of I don't know, some kind of video game mod or something like that, and he's selling it, and I'm helping him set that up, and I've got his PayPal account set up, and, teaching him kind of like, the fundamentals. And that's so exciting as a mom who is a business owner. But even with that type of exposure that he gets, because I'm more mindful about certain things, there's still so many things that fall under the radar, things you don't think of. Like one day he brought up, he basically has this fear of taxes. It's like, there's so much out there that is negative that we sort of take for granted, some of like these basic fundamental things that our kids are being exposed to and formulating these conclusions that are sort of, maybe inaccurate or disempowering. It's like, as a mindset coach, I want to clean that up for him right now so that, he can thrive in his life. But you're right, there's not many resources available. So what you're creating, what you have created, and you're continuing to elaborate on is such a valuable resource, because we as adults who are doing our inner work, we're constantly having to challenge the shit that we've been conditioned with throughout our
Right.
whole lives.
Yep.
You're absolutely right. It is that scarcity mindset, and everything is, very disempowering and not really set up. Societal conditioning is not exactly conducive to being a successful entrepreneur.
It's not. The messages are quite opposite. It's dependence. It's kind of welfare, social safety net. We'll support you. You deserve this, free that, and I think the cultural messages are quite strong in the opposite direction, which for me is why it was perhaps not too surprising when, as we start doing the Tuttle Twins books, we would get these parents reaching out to us, and they would say, "My gosh, I learned things in these that I was never taught as a kid. I didn't learn that in school." And so suddenly our framing started to shift where we're like, okay, these are kids' books, but now they're more like family educational resources for mom and dad to learn, maybe brush up if they learned part of it like 20 years ago, never thought about it since. But in a lot of cases, they're telling us they've never encountered ideas like this before and topics like this. One of our most recent books is we took Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and we turned it into a kids version. And so that just came out like but again, like personal development, right? Like really focused on doing the right thing, making good decisions. And so parents have really valued this not only for their kids, but oftentimes for themselves. And what's fun for me is I'm big into personal development, always recommending books. I think I've mentioned two or three or already on our interview here together. I'm always recommending books, but how many people actually follow through and get them? I think there's a certain type of person who does, who's always wanting to like they're hungry for improvement. But for the average adult on the street, they're not interested. Few people read books or listen or whatever. They're not really engaged in that type of learning. But if I take that average person and I say, let's say it's a mom named Susan. I say, okay, Susan, you got two, three kids. Do you want your kids to be growth minded? Well, yeah. Do you want your kids to be good critical thinkers? Of course. Like, okay, here's a kid's book where you can talk to your kids about stuff. Oh, okay. She goes and she reads that book with her kids. Suddenly, Susan is getting exposed to the same type of ideas where before she might have had a wall up that prevented her from reading an adult, self-improvement book or economic book or whatever. So it's actually been a very effective way to reach whole families with this kind of simplified material. Get the foot in the door, get them thinking about these ideas, and our goal ultimately is to graduate them up to like the more significant books and curriculum and things that have like the real value. But for us, it's a very strategic effort to really plant a lot of seeds and get past a lot of those barriers that parents put up. Now we instead like I watch Shark Tank religiously every single episode, and like Mark Cuban all the time when there's a kid's product or a pet product, he'll point out that like those are the two categories where people will spend indiscriminately, right? They'll be stingy when it comes to investing in themselves, but if it's their kids or their pets, they'll say, "Take my money because I care about my kitty and my kids." And so here we can leverage that with these children's books and say, because you want to invest in your kids, get the Tuttle Twins. Oh, by the way, you might learn a thing or two as well. And then they're having an amazing discussion as a family. And for us, that's what really matters.
So great. All right. Well, I would love to keep extracting awesome stuff from you because I know there's a lot more in that head of yours. But because we are out of time, I want to make sure that our listeners know how they can connect with you. So, are you able to share with us how to get your books and a bit more about how to learn more about what you're doing with your other business as well?
Yeah. So the kids' books, Tuttle Twins, are just at TuttleTwins.com. They're on Amazon as well, but you get a better deal on our website with some freebies and things like that. So TuttleTwins.com is where to go for those. All my other books are on Amazon. I've written a whole bunch of stuff for parents and folks there. I'm super easy to find. Just Google Connor Boyack or ConnorBoyack.com as a little page about me. I'm super easy to reach on social media. Always happy to engage with people and answer questions. If you're curious about the kind of legal stuff that I was mentioning at the beginning, Libertas Institute, that's libertas.org. However, what I would also point your listeners to is, they live all over the place, and our organization primarily focuses in Utah, where we live. There are groups like us all across the country, and we're all part of a group called the State Policy Network. So that website is spn.org. So if you run a business and you need help with this law that's in your way or this regulation, or you've got this issue that you're working on, go to spn.org, click on your state, and then it'll show you, oh, here's the groups working in your state. Give them a buzz, tell them your story. They'd be happy to help. And they're in your backyard. So connect with them now. Even if you don't have a problem, you can go connect with those guys now. And so that when you do have a problem a year or two from now, you'll have their number and they'll like you and want to help you. But that way, all your listeners, wherever they are, there's a resource through spn.org where they can connect with the folks working in their backyard and get the help that they need.
Perfect. I want to thank you so much, Connor, for being with us today and sharing. You mentioned a couple of great books. So for our readers out there, make sure you check those out because I know we've got a lot of readers in our audience. And I mean, this really has been a great conversation, full of lots of gold. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alicia. Appreciate it.
And thank you to all of our listeners. You know, we're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.